Welcome back to GBGuns Aromory, the series where we're looking back at stuff reviewed in the past, things from a personal collection, and I'm giving a little more of the thoughts and feels, a little less of the facts and performance, since it's already covered in videos done maybe a few months ago, maybe a few years ago. And from you guys, since this stuff's been out for a while, I'm looking to hear your thoughts and reflections on, and experiences on these things, since they are chances. Nothing new, and likely something that you've already owned, shot, heard about, handled, what have you. This is not breaking news like we get on the main channel. And today is a Gen 4 Glock 34. Now, I don't talk a lot of Glock on the main channel, though it was some of my earliest experience with handguns, as I'm sure it was for many of you. What happened to me? I moved back to the US, ready to get in handguns, didn't know much about them at all. Went to the gun shop and got talked into a Glock. Sound familiar? It's pretty standard. For me, it was a Glock 19. This was after I realized that my 1911 all-steel single-stack 45 was going to be a little too heavy and uncomfortable to carry. Plus, I had moved to, at the time, the free state of Washington, and knew I could have higher capacity if I wanted to. So I went with the Glock 19 and kind of liked it. I wasn't sure if some of the discomfort, some of my challenges were from that particular match of gun to person, since just like cars, I do believe there's a handgun for everyone. But I did a lot of learning with it, a lot of training with it, started competing in local matches, realized that a 4-inch 9mm was not the ultimate as far as what could run in competition. And as I began tinkering with that Glock 19 to make it better for competition, I also started to realize that my edits and changes to the thing were making it a little bit less of a good carry gun. So I wanted something else that I could use, that I could tinker with. It would be competition only, and I wouldn't have to worry about it. At the time, I was still active duty Army and used Glock's Blue Line program to purchase this Glock 34. It, of course, has also been tinkered with quite a bit, because who leaves a Glock stock, right? This is, I want to say 2011, 2012, maybe 13-ish time frame. So immediately swapping out trigger parts and springs and sights and barrels and all those kinds of things. Still didn't quite get it great for me, but it was still a good gun. And this is where I started to really learn about the advantage of a longer slide and a longer barrel. Longer barrel, you're getting more velocity. The same ammunition hits harder at higher speeds than it does at lower speeds. And so by moving to this, I was able to knock over bowling pins easier. I was able to knock over popper targets easier. Because the rounds were hitting harder, my shot placement didn't need to be as perfect. This is also where I learned the advantages of a longer slide when it comes to recoil impulse. Longer slide, cycling slower. It's more mass, although there's that big window cut out to keep the slide from getting too heavy. More mass, takes it longer to get going, runs out of steam depending on your springs a little bit sooner, and then comes back forward, depending on your spring, with good authority to help keep the nose down. So you end up with a slower recoil impulse that is a little more controllable. You end up with a little more nose heavy settling as the slide closes, for a little assist, if you will, in countering that flip. And then most importantly, because mind you, this is before red dots became mandatory, you have a longer sight radius. That longer sight radius, distance between front and rear sight, which my fingers can barely reach, ends up giving you a steadier sight picture. It's easier to align sights and takes, let me put it this way, you're more aware of how much wrist movement it takes to finally align your sights versus a short sight radius. The same little tiny movement of wrist can really throw you off. So it's easier to get on target and hold steady with a long sight radius, easier to confirm sight picture, and it became a gun I could really tinker with. And as I've said in other videos and a couple articles, I did one for AmmoLand.com a few years ago that I'm sure Glock did not appreciate, about why I have a love-hate with Glocks. There is a massive aftermarket for them. You can change just about everything, and now quite easily. At the time it was still kind of cutting edge, but you can build a complete Glock without using any Glock parts. There is so much aftermarket out there for them. And what I think the hardcore fanboys like to ignore is the reason why all those parts exist. Glock was able to undercut the competition quite strongly to secure lots of law enforcement contracts. They were able to keep their own cost low, which allowed them to undercut prices very well by not really innovating, not really changing much. Across the generations, not a whole lot of change. What that means for Glock is fewer molds, fewer tools, fewer programming bits. It is easier for Glock to produce any generation of Glock than it is for, say, Walther to go back through their lineup, or Smith & Wesson to go through their lineup. A lot of parts interchangeability meant that existing inventory of parts could still be used. So the Glock became very ubiquitous, much to the profit of Glock. They're smart business for doing it that way. However, since the gun never really changed, it quickly became dated. It, in my opinion, has remained a 90s gun for a long time. And so as the competition, Smith & Wesson, Walther, insert your favorite company here, there was a need and a desire by Glock shooters and owners to catch up. So that allowed the aftermarket to open up. Aftermarket companies also had a greater sense of security that whatever piece, part, detail, whatever feature, service they're offering has some longevity to it, because there were so many guns that it could apply to, and knowing that Glock wouldn't change things so much that their parts would immediately become obsolete and no longer of interest to the general public. So aftermarket flourishes. The other aspect of Glocks that I came to really love and appreciate is that they are incredibly simple. And as a result, pretty much anyone can learn to tinker on a Glock. Doesn't require much tools, doesn't require much intelligence or knowledge, and swapping parts becomes something that's kind of quick and easy and fun, and you can really learn a lot. And that's what I'm grateful to Glocks for. I came to learn a lot about handguns, how they work, how certain modifications may or may not change things the way I thought they would, or what my needs might be. And it also helped me identify what I do and don't like in a handgun as far as shapes and ergonomics and all that kind of stuff. So it was pretty cool. And though I haven't competed in a long time, and I probably would not use this Glock 34 if I were to compete today, it still has a prized special spot in my heart because I learned a lot, and I'm grateful for that. Plus, the big igloo world collapse type thing, I'm pretty sure I can get Glock parts somewhere forever. You know, you watch post-apocalyptic movies or play those video games and they're discovering stuff that hasn't been produced in decades. Glock parts will be like that because there's so many of them out there. So, fun thing to hang on to. Not my favorite gun by far, but it's also been interesting to see how things have continued to advance for this classic firearm. I mean, effectively it is. It's from the 90s, right? I have in here an M Carbo trigger that was sent to the channel not too long ago, and was really impressed with it. It beat the snot out of what had been a cutting-edge aftermarket trigger that I paid a couple $100s for years prior, when the Gen 4s were still the latest hotness. So it's a fun thing to get into if you're looking for something to tinker with and want to explore what changing a spring does and what changing a connector does, or if polishing something is a good idea or a bad idea. I highly recommend the Glock as a project gun because you're not going to wreck it. If you do, there's plenty of replacement parts, both factory and aftermarket, readily available, and the prices on them continue to come down as more and more people get into it. Stuff gets old, it's no longer the cutting edge. It's a fun project gun and mostly enjoyable to shoot. It's interesting, as I hold this, it doesn't feel right to me, but that's because I never became a fan of the Glock grip angle. I have the larger backstrap on here. That was one of the kind of oohs and ahs of the Gen 4s as they caught up to the Walther P99 with interchangeable backstraps, except not quite. They were an add-on. They weren't really a change, they were adding something to. And I added this because it lengthened my reach to the trigger. For my XXL hands, it gave me perfect trigger placement without having to think about it. However, it also extended this hump that I'm not a fan of and kind of digs into my hand. Now, obviously, you guys have seen me shoot a lot of different firearms. It doesn't stop me from being able to shoot it. It's just what do I find comfortable or not, depending on how my hand falls on the back or side of the stock. You see that hump there is comfortable to me if my hand is rotated more forward. If I had smaller hands, that would be pretty good for me. But because my hands are the size they are, I end up properly behind the gun, and as a result, that heel digs in and is not too comfortable for me. Curious if you guys have any Glock stories. I'm sure you have. Share with us your journey with Glock. There's nothing wrong with liking them. A lot of people think that I'm bashing them for having moved past them, but as I just said in this video, and I've said in articles and videos all over the place, I'm grateful for my time with Glock. They're just not a personal choice for me. Let me know, let us know what your journey was with Glocks, what you like to tinker with or not, or if you just run them stock. No shame in that. That's GBGuns Armory. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.